This is Rev Bruce coming at you on 4th of July. Wanted to make sure that we didn't miss a beat, keep it consistent. And so I want to make sure that you had the opportunity to hear some things that I'm apt and excited to share. So this is pretty much what we're going through 4th of July, a celebration for the United States. But as Frederick said, he didn't believe that it was his time to rejoice. He didn't believe it was something that was destined for him. And so keep in mind, this is about not just inspiration, but also information. And so definitely we will be getting back to guests the remainder of this month. Have some exciting guests, some interesting and intriguing men and women who are on the move, highly active in different regards. But I wanted to make sure that we spend some time today, with coffee and chat, getting into, just some things that are simply about, where we are and what we're doing, not only as a nation, but also as people. This is global. This is not just California. This is not just the U.S. This is global. And so as a global mindset, global ideology, humanism, right, we want to make sure that people are heard, people are understood, that different opinions, different ideas are shared. And so one of the things I wanted to make sure I did today was, as we look at our agenda, part of our agenda today goes into one, economic empowerment, two, liberation through literacy, and three, this whole thing that's about Awaken America and the 2020 campaign. And so as we do that, I want to make sure I pay homage to some people that have, made my development and helped shape me. And so I want to make sure that I am conscious to share with you that I'm a preacher, I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, but I'm also involved in community, involved in change, involved in youth development, involved in prison reform, changes of that nature. And so here we go. I want to make sure that I pay homage to and give it up for those that have taught me. DeHaan Blevins, for one, the Urban Warriors. Also looking at Starla Lewis, highly regard her teaching and training for me in Black history, and especially what she taught through Black family and Black psychology. Also, Dr. Yvette Powell, Dr. Greg Carr, Anthony Browder, Dr. Khalid Muhammad, rest in peace, Black Community Crusade for Children, and CDF Freedom Schools. I got involved in social action through them. And so part of what I present today is based upon all of that and what I learned at Morehouse College, what I learned through UCLA, what I got through the Zulu Nation. And so I say this to lead into part of what this discussion is. And I say this because I also was taught at the feet of Dr. Timothy J. Winters. That's Mom Moses. And Pastor Terry Wade Brooks, that's my Joshua. And so in doing this, I'll make sure that I honor these people by presenting ideas and not dogging anyone, but also calling out where we can possibly make changes and we can possibly move forward and have a better tomorrow. one of the things I really like to get into is that when we talk about a holiday, we talk about a holiday, 4th of July is seen as a holiday. And we got to talk about Juneteenth being a holiday. And I respect people's wishes, you know. I respect people's history, their past, their heritage, but also I respect the fact that part of what Frederick Douglass said in his address on that day in 1852, in recognizing this historic time, he said, "I say it with a sad sense of disparity between us. I'm not included within the pale of glorious anniversary, this glorious anniversary, the pale of glorious anniversary. Your high independence only reveals the immeasurable distance between us. This 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn." Part of what we look at is that the 4th of July is seen as a holiday. It's seen as a recognition for independence. But a holiday is nothing more than a holy day. It's a derivative of what was once set aside as holy days. And so those that read the Bible will know that there are certain holy days, the Sabbath you're to keep holy, and other days that you're supposed to treat as a Sabbath, as a holy day. And so when we say that something is a holiday, whether it be MLK Day, Cesar Chavez Day, or, whatever, we're saying that it's something to be set apart, something to be recognized. And so when we do that, it's with a certain regard. When we do that, it's with a certain mindset behind it. And so when we say that the 4th of July is a holy day, and by those who are under the government and the rule of the country, and for them to not feel included in it, then it can't be all that holy to begin with. And so we need to be mindful of how we look at certain things. And so if we're really trying to get people together in this whole time of movement for change and inclusiveness, then we really need to look at how holy are our holidays. And so I say that because as we move on, there's an idea, right? There's an idea that people are not satisfied. There's an idea that people are disgruntled. There's an idea that people are upset and angry and ready to, tear the roof off the sucker, and to go along with that, that's on both sides of most arguments. You have people talking about Black Lives Matter. You have people talking about all lives matter, and then people talking about blue lives matter. So people are upset, and in that tension, they're also defensive. And so in all that, I want to make sure that we keep in mind that we can make some changes, but we first need to change our perspective. We first need to change our perspective on who we're really talking about and what we're really talking about. What's your agenda? And what's the person that you're supposedly opposed against agenda? And is there a compromise? Is there something in the middle? But in the midst of all that, for everything that's politically correct and politically incorrect, I need to at least know when I'm offending somebody. I need to at least know when I'm excluding someone. And so that's where we need to be looking at this a little differently. So as we take this approach, one of the things I'm really excited about is just getting into this whole idea of Awaken America, right? And Awaken America is something that I'm working on. We'll be talking about it a little bit later. I've been putting it out there. This whole, the whole thing of America blowing up with George Floyd and all these atrocities and police brutality. It was already in the works for me to work on this Awaken America campaign, but even more so when we start getting into police brutality and social justice and inclusiveness and equity. Even with COVID-19, and as we saw the digital divide come up again, and what's equitable and inequitable in education, and the expectations of someone who doesn't have access to technology to be able to do it remotely when there might be only mobile devices shared within a family, or who knows what the situation is unless we ask, unless we investigate, unless we go deeper beyond the surface level, because that's the problem in some cases. We're just at the surface. And so I want to get into that a little bit, but understand when I say Awaken America, this is about the wake-up call that we need for an election year, the wake-up call that we need for accountability from our public officials, those elected and appointed, those that are on staff of elected officials, those who call themselves to be community leaders. We need to wake up, and we need to wise up. We need to keep this in mind, because through it all, there will be some people who actually say they speak for us, but they have no real voice. There'll be some people who say that they're part of what we're trying to do, but they only have their own personal agenda. So be aware and be wise, and as they say, be woke. Here we go. Truthfully, let's talk about something else just for a moment. Let's talk about being liberated through literacy. I want to inspire somebody today, because there's a aspect of this whole COVID-19 that has set us back a little bit, because we are now looking at education differently. And we're looking at education from a level of engagement. And when we talk about engagement, students having more screen time, students being involved with the lessons, being involved with the chat, with the instruction. And the problem is, we need to first ask the question, is some of this really education to begin with? Is some of this really getting to the heart of our students, of our children, of our youth learning? Or is it just checking off the box to say, hey, we did that? You know, you can look at it how you want to, you can say it how you want to, but part of what we're seeing is that people aren't getting involved in the distance learning, the remote learning, with a whole bunch of fanfare. They're not getting involved and falling all over the place and getting excited about it. What is going to keep students engaged? And at the heart of education is learning. And at the heart of education, education should be liberating. It should be freeing. Let me share this with you and keep myself honest. What Dr. Carter G. Woodson said, and this is the man who wrote The Miseducation of the Negro. Carter G. Woodson said, for me, education means to inspire people to live more abundantly, to learn to begin with life as they find it and make it better. That's how he summed up education. That's how a leading historian and scholar, the father of Black History Week, which became Black History Month, that's how he identified education. And so when we talk about that, reading is a basis for learning, and reading literacy is one way by which, two examples, we're liberated. I'm going to take you through the excerpts of Malcolm X. And part of what Malcolm X shared in part of his autobiography, as told to Alex Haley. Fascinating book, and I highly recommend anyone who's seeking to make personal change read it. But what he shared in a chapter that dealt with learning to read, he said, many who today hear me somewhere in person or on television, or those who read something I've said, will think I went to school far beyond the 8th grade. This impression is due entirely to my prison studies. I saw the best thing I could do was get a hold of a dictionary to study, to learn some words. I was lucky enough to reason also that I should try to improve my penmanship. It was sad. I couldn't even write in a straight line. It was both ideas together that moved me to request a dictionary along with some tablets and pencils from the Norfolk Prison Colony School. I spent 2 days just riffling uncertainly through the dictionary's pages. I had never seen so many words existed. Never realized so many words existed. I didn't know which words I needed to learn. Finally, just to start some kind of action, I began copying. In my slow, painstaking, ragged handwriting, I copied into my tablet everything printed on the first page, down to the punctuation marks. I believe it took me a day. Then aloud, I read back to myself everything I had written on the tablet. Over and over, aloud to myself, I read my own handwriting. Listen, and I'm going to read only parts of this, but part of what Malcolm did was he got determined to learn something. He was driven to learn something, and so he did that. He went after it. And real education, right, as Carter G. Woodson shared, right, is to get someone to seek for making their life better. Look at this second paragraph here. It says, I was fascinated that I went on. I copied the dictionary's next page, and the same experience came when I studied that. With every succeeding page, I also learned of people and places and events from history. Actually, the dictionary is like a miniature encyclopedia. Finally, the dictionary's A section had filled a whole tablet, and I went on to the B's. It went a lot faster after so much practice helped me to pick up handwriting speed. Between what I wrote in my tablet and writing letters during the rest of my time in prison, I would guess I wrote 1 million words. Amazing. And in reflection, Malcolm said this, I have often reflected upon the new vistas that reading opened to me. I knew right there in prison that reading had changed forever the course of my life. As I see it today, the ability to read awoke inside me some long dormant craving to be mentally alive. I certainly wasn't seeking any degree the way a college confers a status symbol upon its students. Not long ago, an English writer telephoned me from London asking questions. One was, what's your alma mater? I told him, books. You will never catch me with a free 15 minutes in which I'm not studying something I feel might be able to help the Black man. And let's take pause for a moment. What Malcolm demonstrates and exhibits is an ability to discover more about what's around you in the world. And books allow that to happen. Books allow us to escape into other avenues of life, other places. And so Malcolm developed his language, his vocabulary. He said over 1 million words, but it also taught him about places and people and events throughout history. The knowledge that he was able to gain from the dictionary, acting as a mini encyclopedia, is a world that many students only know as Google. Google it, Google that. And so if we only get the Google and Wikipedia of it and we never explore the deeper ideas that are buried in other aspects of knowledge, will be limited. And so Malcolm, although he stopped at the 8th grade, was liberated through literacy. I give you another example. Frederick Douglass again. And Frederick Douglass shared that it was not just the story that we often hear about his master's wife, his mistress, teaching him how to read that inspired him, but it was also the fact that his mother, an enslaved woman that he did not spend a lot of time with, but he was exposed to on a limited basis. His mother, he writes about in My Bondage and Freedom, he says, I learned after my mother's death that she could read, and that she was the only one of all the slaves and colored people in Tuckahoe who enjoyed that advantage. He points out that there was an advantage to her knowing how to read. He points out that even among not just the slaves, but those who were colored and assumedly free, that she was the only one in that area who could read. And so that's part of his motivation in learning how to read. But what's often told is the story of Frederick's mistress teaching him how to read. And the story goes on to talk about what happens at the discovery of him being taught to read and being taught the alphabet. At the discovery of it was the master had something to say. Mr. All promptly forbade the continuance of her instruction. It could only lead to mischief. Learning to read would spoil the best nigger in the world. If you teach that nigger, speaking of myself, how to read the Bible, there will be no keeping him. What Douglass says is that the master saw that it was unlawful, right? It was unfit for this woman to be teaching him how to read. Think about it. And it goes on to point out that there was a threat of him having knowledge and understanding and the ability to read, because think about it. The man said there would be no keeping him. He wouldn't be able to stay in his current stature as a slave. And so here we go. The next thing that we learn is that Frederick Douglass took it upon himself, right? He said, seized with determination to learn to read at any cost, I hit upon many expedients to accomplish the desired end. He would connive and use trickery and all sorts of different methods to get others to teach him the letters, the alphabet, and to read, but he had a taste for it. What taste for knowledge are we giving our children? You know, what taste for knowledge are we pushing forward? I got to give credit to Dr. Victor Rios. He's an amazing educator, but he also has a great insight and a way of communicating the struggle and strife of children of color and their experiences, the children in poverty and their experiences and obstacles. And he speaks from his own experience and the ideas of homelessness and the ideas of food insecurity and how these things are factors that impact a child's desire to learn. Something that we heard from Maslow a long time ago when it comes to hierarchy of need. If you haven't fed them, they're most likely not going to pay attention. And if they're desiring shelter and survival, they're not seeking that higher element of altruism. So I got to give it to Victor Rios, Dr. Victor Rios, and what he is trying to do, not only with education, but also with social platforms and youth development. I also have to pay homage to Dr. Jose Manuel Villarreal. I have to say that, also known as Dr. V, that he has also helped with systems thinking with a lot of the work that, I've been able to do in education, and he's also helped shape some of the ideas around who's telling the story of a student. And if we have taught them well, they'll tell their own story. But in the meantime, as we teach them, we need to advocate and tell their story for them. We need to walk along with them and not just say, well, when you get there, you'll be able to do it. It doesn't work that way. What we have to keep in mind is that we have a duty, we have a responsibility as educators, as leaders, to help our young people, to help them develop and get to the point where they have a quest and a desire for reading, for learning, and having a better life. Well, I say that because as we shift, well, I'm looking at this whole climate right now, and in particular in the Black community. I'll just stay there for a minute. And we're talking about boycott or buy Black or economic empowerment. And I say that because when we look at the strategies of bringing about change, when we look at community organizing, when we look at grassroots organizing, when we look at all these different aspects of getting people involved, economics, socioeconomics plays a major part. Employment was the issue, affirmative action and education was the issue. And so economics still comes into play, whether we're talking about redlining or we're talking about, business development. But here goes the thing that is out and about right now. You've got two primary pieces of work that are going on, right? One that says we should be buying Black, right, up through July 6th. And another says on July 7th, hold back on the cash, blackout day. Both are novel concepts. But here goes the first. If we only buy Black for a period, what becomes the norm, and then how are Black businesses supported beyond that? And does that one day of Black economic withdrawal also impact Black businesses? And how does that work? And so as a community, we need to talk that out. We need to see what that's about and see how that fits into the dynamics of what we're talking about. And in all truth, we need to be careful with how we present that, because if we're not careful, it'll turn into a limited support for Black businesses, and then instead of a blackout, we'll be looking for a bailout later on. And I mean that in the sense of COVID-19 struck Black business and small business and minority-owned businesses and some women-owned businesses in a different manner, in the sense to where, as some businesses were launching, they lacked the infrastructure in order to get the relief that other businesses were able to receive based upon what they already had established. And so here we go. Are we invested enough in minority-owned businesses to get behind them and plant a seed into those businesses and to help create infrastructure, whether it be through a co-op or a collective or anything else that would get infrastructure built to support businesses in local communities to survive issues such as COVID-19, pandemics like that. What are we doing? What are we doing? That's my question. And then what are we doing beyond consumerism? I want to make sure I make this point. When we say that we're looking at economic empowerment, that's beyond the ability to purchase things. That's beyond consumerism. And so consumerism is technically part of the problem. And so if we're strictly consumers, that means we aren't addressing the ability to create and to sustain our own businesses. And so we'll always have to spend money and never become contributors if we're always consumers. And so that's the flip. When you look at Amazon, they're looked at contributors because they're creating a service that supports people's desires, consumers. When you look at Tesla, yeah, it's good for the earth, but they're creating a product, they're contributing to the economy and creating jobs, which is good for the economy. And so small business creates the majority of the jobs, small and mid-sized businesses that are in most communities, other than businesses that are driven by military contracts, regional development, right? And large corporation headquarters and plants. And so what I mean by plants, I mean factories, right? And so when we think about that, if we support small to mid-sized businesses in developing their infrastructure, they would be better off, right? And in them being better off, that would also help with the economy. Here's my problem. Is that enough said right there? I'm shaking my head. A one-day boycott isn't effective. Look at it. The great boycott, right, that the United Farm Workers had with Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, that lasted 16 years. The Montgomery bus boycott was over a year. It was 381 days. And so if we're saying blackout day and we really want to have an economic boycott, that's just a pause. That's not hurting someone. That's not a dire impact on a business. Come on, man. And if we're trying to make a stand and point that out, that's happened with the Millionaire March, and we talked about black dollars, right? We have to extend it. Are we willing to extend it beyond one day? Are we willing to extend it beyond 1 week? Can we take it a whole month and come up with a strategy or an agenda on where to spend that money, how to utilize that money? Can we collectively put that money together and create venture capital? There's a podcast I often listen to, First Million. She started a venture capital company. Guess what? While she's on food stamps. Can we get with that? Can we get with that? Think about it. The power that we could have collectively, economically, doesn't stop with consumerism. And we have to look at that. We have to look at that broader. That's part of what I'm working on with Awaken America as well, because it comes down to this. We're more than just buying power. We're more than just having the ability to afford to live a certain lifestyle, to drive a certain car, to live in a certain neighborhood, to have the 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and 2 cars in the garage. It's more than that as we talk about the American dream. And if you want to get into it, let's be real. Frazier wrote The Black Bourgeoisie. And when you read it, you can understand that when you talk about an American dream, you also are talking about systematically putting yourself out there, right, to emulate or assimilate with what would once be considered an antebellum lifestyle, plantation style, right? You want a big house like Master, want a big yard like Master, want to have all the rides and items and trinkets and toys like Master. That's what the gist of Frazier's Black Bourgeoisie was about. And if you get an opportunity, check it out. I'll add it to the list of books and items that I discussed here in the description on the video on YouTube. But definitely get to understand that why is that dream or desire even on the agenda? And does it fit with who you are and what your purpose is, or does it just match up with you keeping up with the Joneses and the folks up the street and next door and around the corner? That's all I can say on that. That's really what we need to start to look at. Where are we with economic empowerment, and have we gotten to a place where we can get beyond purely being consumers, and we can look at how can we be contributors in this economy? I'll throw that out there to say this. Boom. When we talk about Awaken America, there's some things that we're trying to do. There's some things that we're trying to bring about that are on the rise. There's some things that are coming about. Part of what we need to look at is this is an election year. And if you're dissatisfied with whatever is going on economically or politically, then your best bet is to get involved in some aspect of it. And sadly, that could be a wake-up call. And what I'll say is it is a wake-up call, because I think after my review of the voter turnout and participation and the levels of voter involvement and engagement, the numbers have dropped. And even though population numbers have risen for eligible voters, those that have actually registered, come on. And when you break it down by minorities and different groups, we start losing people because we always say this, and let me break this down, and we can still love each other after that. Listen, we always say somebody else is going to do it. Somebody else has got that. Somebody else is going to handle that. Somebody need to do something about that. Well, guess what? I heard from Jesse Jackson a long time ago. I am somebody, and if I am somebody, you are somebody, and you can get involved and do something about it. And that's part of it. That people need to not only be engaged, but they need to be educated and empowered to be engaged. I did some work on voter information and education back in early 90s, Proposition 187. And when you read the proposition, you thought it was doing good for those who were coming to America. And what you find out is that in the legalese, in the language, once you break that down and you give it a good reading, even those with a decent level of education, I'm talking about a decent college level of education, that thing was a word twist, and it got passed, it got voted in because people misunderstood it. And what we want to do is we want to turn this thing around and change up some things so that people can be empowered when they go to vote, that people can be empowered when they go to hold their legislators, their senators, their congressmen, their county representatives, that they can be empowered when they hold these people accountable. And so I say that because in this work for Awaken America, I take a lot of this from Malcolm X's The Ballot or the Bullet. And what Malcolm was saying was extraordinary in the sense of it's one or the other. It's not just a maybe. He said it's got to be the ballot or the bullet, the ballot or the bullet. If you're afraid to use an expression like that, you should get back in the cotton patch. You should get back in the alley. Woo. We suffer political oppression, economic exploitation, and social degradation. All of them from the same enemy. The government has failed us. The time when white people can come in our community and get us to vote for them so that they can be our political leaders and tell us what to do and what not to do is long gone. Malcolm was on fire at this point. And let's be real. Think about it. When we look at today versus what Malcolm was facing going into 1964, you're looking at a choice. You've got these brothers that are armed to the tooth, that don't say just Black Lives Matter, they're saying Black guns matter. And you've got to be mindful that there is an element of society that, beyond the First Amendment, it's all about the Second Amendment, and you have to think about that. And Malcolm was saying that it's volatile, that the conditions have led to a point where it has to be one or the other. And I say that because the conditions for change are at a point where it's boiling over, and people are so upset. The tension is so high, and the dissatisfaction is so high that people want to see change. And so the change that people want to see may not be the same thing that the politicians are delivering on. And so this is for my people in Cali. This is for my people in my home state, right? Get registered to vote. We don't know what it's going to look like because everything is changing. They just shut down the beaches in LA. They're going crazy with this COVID. Most probably it'll be mail in, but guess what? If you're not registered, it don't matter. If you're not on the docket and you're not on the list, it won't matter. You won't even have the opportunity to vote. And so register to vote, get involved with that. You know what I mean? You can do that straight with the state. You can do it where you live with Rock the Vote, but you got to get involved. Check this out. Part of Awaken America is about taking a stand to make a difference. And we have some starting points for voters, for those voters that are ready to get woke. That's the reality, and so when we talk about it, where are we with our engagement as voters? Where are we with our engagement as citizens? Even for y'all that don't vote, that still have to live under the conditions that other folks voted for, how are you holding someone accountable for I talked to somebody the other day and they said this politician was doing a good job. Well, if you have no measure for that person doing a good job, then what in the world is saying that person is doing a good job? How does that come about? How do you get to that point where you just ambiguously say, well, they're doing a good job? Well, because they're not in some scandal, because they're not listed as taking bribes or or doing shady deals, they can be in office and be as clean as a whistle, but they're still not helping you make any progress. That's not a good job. And so that's part of what we're talking about with Awaken America and Vote 2020. The mission is plain and simple. We want to transform the political focus to voter education and voter empowerment. You need to be empowered as a voter, right? And we want to talk about learning how the process works. Learning how the process works. Too many people don't know how the political process works. Too many people don't know the difference between electoral votes and other votes. They don't understand candidacy. They don't understand, the rules and reforms regarding politics. And too many people are just watching. They're just watching. They don't see what's going on. They're just watching. They're not involved. They're not engaged. And so they're missing out on having a hand in how this plays out. And voter empowerment, you need to learn how to work the process, right? Listen, you can't hate the game if you don't know the game, and you can't hate the player if you really don't understand that he's playing by the book. He's playing by the rules of the game, and you're outside the loop. You need to learn how to work the process, quote unquote, to your advantage, for your betterment, to help you out. And so part of what's going on is coming up, right? Real soon, we're gonna have, a voter starting points for 2020, right? What you need to do, I've already put the link in the description on YouTube for this video, but you need to go on and sign up for the newsletter. Once you sign up for the newsletter, we'll drop you into the Facebook group, okay? And through the Facebook group, we will have free webinars on voter education and transition to voter empowerment as well. We'll also have additional self-paced e-courses, a couple of ebooks and reports that'll be coming out, white papers and merchandise. We're going to have some guest presenters also on there that can speak to it from a different aspect than just being concerned citizens. And so I say that because when we look at this, man, this is where we start to get involved in the process to make it change, to make it different, to make it better. When I worked with CDF Freedom Schools, and one of the things that we learned is I can make a difference. I can make a difference. And within that was social action, taking social action, being involved, being engaged, and getting others involved. That's the whole thing right now. If we take a honest look at it from a holistic point of view, we're not getting people involved, and we're getting people passed up and left by the wayside. We're getting people dropped off, and they're missing out. And so what we really need to do is take a moment and say, hey, is this how we want to live? Is this the best that we have to offer? Hey, let's look at it from one simple point of view. If we don't start to do better, we're not going to get any better. And another aspect of this is real simple. Hey, you don't have to agree with everybody, but I definitely say we need to be open, right, to accepting everybody and their opinions, not their agenda, their opinions, right, their perspective, right? People say, this is my truth. We need to be open to that, because some folks, that's all they got is their story. That's all they got is their truth. Listen, if we can hear somebody out, we might be able to help somebody out. I'm going to say it again. If we can hear somebody out, we might be able to help somebody out. And we've got to be willing to accept them where they are, right? Where they are in this walk of life. We all weren't always at maturity. We all weren't always at the point where we could give and take and know what to leave on the table. And so here we are. If we could do that and just be kind enough and offer a little bit of golden rule and let somebody say their piece and not say, oh, well, you just stop. Hear them out. Maybe you can help them out, but accept them and their perspective as being theirs, but you don't have to agree with them. You don't have to fall out with them. Just understand that that's where they're coming from. Understand that's their story. Listen, this is where we are. This is the degree of things going on today. I hope somebody understands that those stories of Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X, I hope that is an idea of someone saying, look, you know what? I'm going to take ownership of my education. Do you need to go back to college? I'm going back. I'm going back, right? Do you need to go and get your GED? Do you need to take those citizenship classes, right? Find that self-determination to get it done, to make the first step, register. Do you want to see something change? Get involved with this Vote 2020 Awaken America campaign. Get involved with that. If you don't get involved with us, get involved with the Constitutional Rights Foundation, with the League of Women Voters, your Democratic Club, or whatever your group is that's, politically involved, but get involved in some of the free education that can empower you as a citizen. It's your right. It's your right to vote. And I gotta say this, we gotta think about this, communities of color, people of color, right? We gotta think about this. Where are we with our economic development and economic empowerment? What do we have, going on? What do we have that is going to advance us for generations, right? NAACP, for the advancement of colored people. Where are we at with that? Where are we at with that? Longtime friend, Dan Jackson. We're growing up in Riverside. His mama used to drag us to them NAACP youth meetings. She used to pay for multiple children in our community to be members of the NAACP. I used to get the Crisis magazine and be involved in NAACP youth activities. And so where are we with that advancement? Are we still hustling dues, or are we trying to get something done? Where are we with that advancement? I'm just saying that woman is past and gone, and God rest her soul. But I'd hate for her to be turned in the grave to see that we're still just trying to get dues and not get nothing done. Hey, I hope this has helped you. I hope this has made for a better day. I feel almost like I'm preaching. I'm about to take my tie off and snap some buttons and go into, I feel the help coming on. But I'm gonna let that be. And what I want to say is this: I love you, and I want the best for you, and I want you to have a better day today than you had yesterday. Make the most of today. Do something different today. Be something different today, and make a difference today. God bless. God be with you. Until next week, this has been Coffee and Chat with Red Bruce. Peace.